Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, TIFF's Senior International Programmer for Canada, and this is The Other Thing I Do. My guest this week is José Avelino Gilles Corbett Lourenço, a writer and director of extremely clever short films like Hollow Bones and Romance Language, who made his feature debut last year with Young Werther, a delightful update of the Goethe novel starring Douglas Booth as a loquacious fancy lad whose quest to retrieve a family heirloom in Toronto is derailed by his infatuation with a lovely young woman, played by Alison Pill, who unfortunately happens to be engaged to someone else. Chaos ensues, and also a great deal of fun. And if you missed it at TIFF, you can catch up to it in theaters across Canada this Friday, January 10th. And you really should. José picked Wayne's World, the 1992 Saturday Night Live spin-off, directed by documentary filmmaker Penelope Spheeris, that brought Mike Myers and Dana Carvey's goofball double act to the big screen, made Myers a movie star overnight, and introduced Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody to the MTV generation in the silliest possible way. Whether you were there at the beginning or grew up watching it obsessively on cable as a kid, it's a charming and frankly adorable comedy about hanging out with your friends, being true to yourself, and lusting after a really hot guitar. Party time. Excellent. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Wayne's World is it's a film that I love. I mean, I guess that's just it. And I've not thought deeply about why I love it so much until we started talking about doing this episode of the show. And yeah, I have a lot of things to say about Wayne's World, turns out.
I'm delighted. It's one of those films that has always occupied a really weird space in my mind because this is how old I am. I saw Mike Myers do Wayne Campbell on stage at Second City in like 1987 or 1988. I was covering it as a reviewer for the York University Excalibur. And he did Wayne. He did Wayne in a version of Romeo and Juliet, but he'd, I think, already done Wayne. Either it was a character he just pulled out of his back pocket all the time. For Canadian television shows. So it was the late night show on City Limits, I think it was, where he would show up and talk about videos.
Can I ask you this? When you first saw him do it on the stage in 86 or 87 at Second City, did you imagine that one day that character was going to be at the center of one of the most important films in cinematic history?
I did not. No, I mean, he was
one that would blend comedy, philosophy, and social commentary in this incredible package with insane, enduring cultural influence.
Well, it's funny, that stuff was there. That's what's so interesting. Like he managed to do. It was a Romeo and Juliet thing, and Juliet rejects him. It was a very, very short scene. Might have been Deb Thieker, but when he was rejected, he actually delivered the pathos. Like, he performed it. Yeah. He wasn't just goofing. And I remember I will never forget the line, which was he's like, we cannot be together, Romeo, and he just sort of sags, and he's wearing the denim jacket and a ball cap with the hair. Yeah. And he just sags and adjusts the cap for a little bit of the hair. It was a great prop bit. And then he just quietly says, "Then I shall hie me to the 401 and end this." And it was right? Like,
it's perfect.
It was sharp. It was specific. It was in context. And it's like, shit, this is funny. This was really funny.
Yes. I don't know. Wayne is this character he's incredible. He's this, headbanger goof, but he's also this wonderful friend and a philosopher. And he has great depth, but it never comes off as pretentious. I don't know. He's tossing out references to Kierkegaard at the same time as he's on his knees bowing to Alice Cooper at the same time as he's lusting after a 64 pre-CVS Strat. He's this incredible teenager. Love Wayne. Love him.
He is a rich tapestry.
Yeah, he is a rich tapestry.
And I never thought when they made the movie, it made perfect sense because that was right at the peak of Lorne Michaels' deal with Paramount, where he was spinning every single character off. I think Wayne's World was the one because it was either just before or just after Coneheads. They were both in production at the same time.
I think just before. I remember this Coneheads soundtrack. There was a Red Hot Chili Peppers song, "Soul to Squeeze," that was crazy on the charts that summer. But I feel like that was just after Wayne's World.
I think you're right. I think it was, but Wayne's World was the one that supercharged, like the fact that it was a massive hit supercharged the machinery, and so they just kept cranking them out for another 10 years. Like the Ladies'
Yeah.
Man was what, 2000?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like the downstream effects of Wayne's World are, I mean, Ladies Man, I don't know. But the downstream effects of Wayne's World success are crazy.
Well, he reinvented Queen or reinvigorated Bohemian
Oh,
Rhapsody.
Queen, I feel like in many ways was like completely off the cultural radar in 1992, right? Like, 70s and 80s. Without that scene, without that headbanging scene, that's like so perfect. It's incredible, incredible intro sequence. Yeah, do we appreciate Queen the same way today? Do we have, for better or worse, the Bohemian Rhapsody film? Do we have Rami Malek with an Oscar? Is any of that possible without Wayne's World?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is
Um,
Mike Myers is responsible for as much evil as good.
wow, an aggressive take. Okay, what about this? The Rob Lowe career resurgence as well.
Yeah.
Plagued by Scandal in '88, the sex tape.
Mm-hmm.
'92 is his first big comeback with Wayne's World, playing the incredible villain character in the film.
And he is
Without,
really good at it.
oh, he's
It's
amazing.
great casting.
It's incredible. Then do we have Rob Lowe in National Lampoon? Do we have Christmas Vacation without Wayne's World? Do we have West Wing the same way without Rob Lowe's character? Is Parks and Rec the same show it is without Rob Lowe? Rob Lowe doesn't get to be in any of these things if not for Wayne's World. Parks and Rec elevated Nick Offerman, Aziz Ansari, Aubrey Plaza, Chris Pratt
Yeah.
is, if without Rob Lowe, without Wayne's World, do we have Chris Pratt being in every single thing? I mean, again, is he responsible for good or evil? But without Chris Pratt, there's no Guardians of the Galaxy
Yeah,
trilogy,
that's fair.
which
James Gunn doesn't get to make Superman, which looks really good.
I just watched that trailer this morning and I had shivers. And so anyway, James Gunn's Superman doesn't exist without Wayne's World.
I wonder. And the other really bizarre thing about Wayne's World as a movie, even before anything else, is that it's directed by
Penelope
the
Spheeris.
yeah, who made it's directed by a heavy metal documentarian, which I
Yeah,
think is the key ultimately, right? Because
absolutely. No
as
one
we've seen,
understands youth culture like someone like Penelope Spheeris,
yeah,
right?
and as we've
This
seen over and over again, Mike Myers needs direction. Like he found someone here who could really channel the energy of Wayne and create a context
and the
before.
world
Mhm.
and make this, and the film is beautiful. It actually is so well made. It's easy to like look at it and be like, oh, it's just this easy comedy and it's a Lorne Michaels SNL thing. But it's gorgeous. And there are moments in the film that are, like blow my mind. Like that are just these shots that don't need to be there, but that are. And they're just so illustrative and like paints this like, decline of Western civilization is like, wonderful documentary. I mean, we could go on and on about Penelope Spheeris all day, but like, I don't know. I feel like the vision she brought, like there in that intro sequence with Bohemian Rhapsody, when like the camera sort of just like swings up and there's all those cars impaled on the pole. Just her transitions are so smart and so crisp. Just yeah, and her understanding of like headbanger culture, like it's gorgeous. That
Yeah,
wonder at Stan Mikita's Donuts, people will go off all day about like, oh, Scorsese and Goodfellas. Like, there's, do you know the sequence I'm talking about when he walks in and Ed O'Neill like takes the camera to the side and then Wayne comes and retrieves it in this like meta, like, no, we only me and Garth get to speak to camera. And they're down the story and it's flips away from Garth and then comes back to the old man Withers, set like a throwaway gag to end the sequence that like sets up a throwaway gag at the end of the film. Like it's very well constructed,
yeah, and it was a year after Goodfellas. Like it's a direct reference and
right?
so well done that I suspect, based on the age people were when they saw Wayne's World, that they thought they did it first.
Right.
And that, like
Absolutely.
that, the weird. There's another weird knock-on effect of people seeing a film as kids and then discovering all the things it's sourced from and
Yeah.
all the lifts. But I do love the idea that if nothing else, this movie will introduce people to the decline of Western civilization films and probably before they're ready for them. And you just get to see this strange, gleeful celebration. Myers has spoken a bunch of times about wanting to make his movies like parties that you've been invited to.
Mm,
But I
I
found like
love
with
that.
the Austin Powers films, it gets more and more self-referential and self-absorbed. Just I think just because he's playing so many characters and there's just no room for any of them to breathe because of all the makeup and the way they shoot them. But with the
Yeah.
Wayne's World films, and I do love the second one, I think a little more than the first one, just because
Interesting.
it dares to refuse the audience and just sort of pretend that they're not important for a little while. And so you just
Mm.
get like Wayne's World 2 is the one where you get a run, like he lifted in Ralph Brown because he wanted him to play the same character from Withnail and I. He wanted him to play Danny and just tell weird stories. And it does have my single favorite line of dialogue of any Mike Myers project, which is a long story we don't get to hear that ends with, and that's why Keith Richards cannot be killed by natural means.
Yeah. Yes. There's such a, like, I feel like the linguistic dexterity in Wayne's World 2, like, is unbelievable. Like, the scene backstage with Alice Cooper, where, it's, and again, it's like it's a gag scene. It's like, oh, this heavy metal performer is actually a deep thinker with a love for local history. But as he's explaining like the origins of Milwaukee, and he's like, oh, it's actually the Algonquin word Milwaukee, means the good place, and everyone's sort of rapt and listening to him go on and on. Like, it's beautiful. It's high low. I feel like that's
Yeah.
one of the things this film does so well. I don't want to say it's like straight up Shakespeare, but it's like it has depth. It's not a surface, you can watch it as a surface level thing and just and laugh along at the jokes, but it's yeah, there's high art references throughout. There's yeah, real pathos mixed it, like the earnestness of Wayne in this comedy. Like, it's not it's a film that doesn't take itself seriously, but I don't think it's a silly film.
Yeah, or it enjoys being silly in a way that lets us in on it. Like that Wayne is, I think it goes back to that Romeo and Juliet thing. Like he has these things inside of him, but he is
Yeah.
happiest when he is just being a goof and hanging with his friends,
Yes.
which is what the spirit of the movie is.
Oh, I mean, the the uh the friendship between Wayne and Garth is incredible. Like, it's just there's no there's no like antagonism between them, really, even when they have their brief moment. There's just this beautiful cooperative spirit between them at all times, where, like, there's something to like the Jonah Hill Michael Cera super bad
Yeah.
relationship that I think is established in Wayne and Garth. Like, that scene where it's just like a little interstitial scene, doesn't have to be in the film, but where they're lying down on the car outside the airport, and we don't know why they're there initially, and Garth is just beautifully whistling the theme song to the original Star Trek series. There's no reason for it other than mood and atmosphere and this gorgeous, tender moment where they're sitting essentially in companionable silence, the way that only the best friends can, and it's just a beat that doesn't need to exist in a comedy film, but it does in this film. It's perfect. Everything in this film is just perfect.
Yeah, I always wondered if because Garth didn't exist in the original versions of Wayne. It was just there was this thing called Wayne's Power Minute on a CBC afternoon music video show where Wayne it would be Myers on a park bench as Wayne just talking to the camera for a minute or two and doing rock on faces, but they didn't, like, there were hints of him having this like autodidactic knowledge of all sorts of things, but he would really have to drill in on the videos of the week or whatever it was they were doing. And Garth didn't happen until he got to Saturday Night Live and brought Wayne there to do the cable show in the basement. And he needed a sidekick because it was a television show. Like, it was Wayne's Tonight Show. And Carvey he brings so much to it. But the thing that always struck me was the vulnerability. Like, Garth is shy and quiet, and he's
Oh
the
yeah.
worst kind of sidekick, right? Because he doesn't have the spark.
He does not keep the conversation moving.
No,
He constantly
exactly.
brings conversations to a halt.
Yeah.
But also in this perfect way. Like, that scene where they're at the rock show, the first time that Wayne sees Cassandra, and their friend who's a bit drunk is going on about how much he loves Wayne. Like, I love you, man. I love you. And Wayne's like, like, just can't stop the guy from saying I love you over and over, and then Garth just in his Garthian mode of speech with such finality. It's just like, I love you. Garth just says, thank you. Perfect.
Yeah, they're kind to each other, and Wayne brings something out in Garth, which, I keep thinking, like, if the whole point of Dana Carvey's Garth is that he's an awkward weirdo, there are universes inside of this awkwardness, and Wayne is like the only person who can see them, and he keeps kind of coaxing Garth along. And yeah, you're right, they just enjoy each other's company so much, and because they had worked together on SNL and because they had done enough of the sketches, like there doesn't seem to have been any ego between them. Like, they are a double act, and it only works if they're together.
Yeah. Although I gotta say, like, hearing you have a depth of knowledge of the Wayne character that I do not have. Like, I now want the Blu-ray of Wayne's World that collects all of these segments. I want to see like shaky handycam footage from Second City, and I want to see these. What did you say it was on CBC?
He was
like
on
Wayne's Power Minute.
He was on City Limits on City
Limits,
and then he was also on some CBC show. It might have actually been called It's Only Rock and Roll. It was it was an absolute no budget excuse to show videos, and literally his scenes, the ones I remember, were him shot outside standing on a park bench in like probably the Scarborough Bluffs.
Yes.
And it cost nothing, and it was weirdly engaging. I don't know whatever happened to them.
I don't know if we're going to be getting to this at a later point, but the talk of Scarborough Bluffs and City TV, it just makes me think of the undeniable Canadianness of this film.
Oh yeah, he simply rebadged a bunch of stuff. Like the Gasworks was a club in Toronto on Yonge Street, which is now relocated to Aurora, Illinois. Stan Mikita's Donuts is just Tim Hortons. He picked a different hockey player, and like these jokes were just for us. They were for the locals.
Yeah. What percentage of the audience knows that Stan Mikita was a Chicago Blackhawks legend in the same way that Tim Horton was a Toronto Maple Leafs legend?
I cannot think there was any percentage in America who, maybe, I suppose, like people in Detroit would have got it, or Chicago, or like Illinois, hockey towns, right? Yeah. But most people don't know Tim Hortons was a hockey player anymore because that's ancient. But we all know Tim Hortons. Like until Universal Language this year, that was the best Tim Hortons joke in a movie ever.
Right. Yeah. It's so funny.
It is just so, and it's so. Yeah. And unlike the references he would subsequently bring into his other films, like where The Love Guru is basically just a feature-length Peter Sellers homage, and only he's enjoying it. I
think there were a number of Leafs fans who were happy seeing them raise the cup at the end.
Oh, I guess. Yeah. But we all know that's never going to happen.
Wow.
I was born the year after their last victory. There's no win. There's no win. It's me. I'm the curse. But everything in Wayne's World is just there. Like, right? The references aren't called out. They're just part of the world.
They're just playing street hockey. They're just out there yelling car. Well, one of the great sight gags from the film, his ex-girlfriend Stacy, she's going by on the bike with the neck brace, and or she doesn't have the neck brace yet. This is where she injures herself. Just the hi, Wayne, hi, and then just eats it over the hood of the car. Oh God, a physical and
that's Lara Flynn Boyle, right?
It sure is.
Yeah,
it playing the role so beautifully, like this joke of a character, but really inhabiting it in this perfect way. And like this is, and she's an ex that Wayne doesn't want any part of, but even his, the way that when he's first sort of connecting with Tia Carrera's character Cassandra, and they're speaking in Cantonese about his previous relationship, and it gets very like tender and thoughtful, and they're talking about how it's dangerous to label people, and he doesn't want to resent her, but he feels he's made his position clear, and like it's all very like this is language that you could hear in like a Before Sunset kind of trilogy, or some sort of like very very serious relationship drama. Mm-hmm. It's all the exact language, and it's being sent up, but at the same time it's earnest. It's gorgeous.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. last week I took the holidays off, but we're kicking off the new year in style with Warner's 4K restoration of David Fincher's Seven, and there's a lot more to come. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. He finds a context for, I don't want to say deeper interaction, but self-aware interaction and maturity that, yeah, because Wayne doesn't look like he's capable of any of these things.
Yeah.
But that's why it's so much fun.
Oh. Yeah.
Someone someday will write a treatise on Wayne Campbell being the Messiah, and we all missed it, right? Like he is unfailingly kind. He cannot be tempted. I think it's intentional that Wayne has no flaws. Like all he wants are the things he loves. Yes. And so it means he doesn't have to grow, but it also means he can be treated as a pure and perfect being. And because he's talking to us all the time, we can understand that he has, insecurities and he's nervous and he feels overmatched, especially in the sequel with the mad quest to put on Wayne stock. But in the first movie, he is really it's remarkable how little character development there is because it's not necessary.
Yeah.
Like he just wants a guitar and he's a child, but everyone can, and the girl too. The girl comes alongside the guitar. He wants to live in that world, right? Like he's a guy in a basement who wants to be part of the rock scene.
Yeah.
And he kind of has talent, but that's not what, ultimately, that's not what he wants to do either. I find that fascinating that he really doesn't have a larger desire except to share the things he loved with people, which is what Wayne's World was about as a television show. Like the concept of it is that he's just sharing this enthusiasm. And I guess that's kind of why I relate to him the most over any Mike Myers character, is that he's doing the thing that we all want to do, which is share the things you love without self-consciousness or concern. And it's so sweet. And it's non-competitive, and he invites people in. That's what I mean when that's what he meant, I guess, when he was talking about making the movie like a party that you can come to. And if you're not into it, that's okay. Like he's not chasing people away. He's hoping they find something else to do or someone else to talk to in that space. It's really sweet.
It is sweet, and it's sweet because it really does feel like there's no ulterior motive for him. He is gleeful when he is approached, initially a bit wary when he's approached by the Rob Lowe character and to take his cable access show and turn it into a bigger endeavor. And he's gleeful when he gets the $5,000 they do there. We've got $5,000 dance. But it's not something he's seeking. He does just want to have this space to share his interests, to share his passions, to joke around, be with his friends. It's wonderful. And he's like, I was thinking, I can't remember if we talked about this a few weeks ago when we were talking about the film, but he's in many ways, he predates the foreshadows the rise of influencer culture. He's essentially like a TikTok personality, right? Except guileless. There's no he's not seeking brand deals. And in fact, when he's presented with the brand deals, there's that incredible meta sequence where, he's like, I will not bow to any sponsor as they're doing the sight gags with the pizza boxes. And I got Garth's Reebok outfit, where they cut to Garth. And Garth is just wearing his regular clothes. Then they cut to Garth and he's in the full Andre Agassi, Reebok gear. I want to go for Halloween next year. I want my wife to go as Wayne, and I want to go as Garth in the full Reebok gear. It's a very specific couple's costume.
I can see that. That's great. And the and the sorry, I'm still laughing at that.
I'll send you a photo when we do it.
But the fact that he trusts the audience to get it too, because in the self-awareness thing, it's a big leap for early 1992. This thing came out at Valentine's Day, if I remember correctly. It was
really?
Yeah, it was winter. I mean, I saw it at there's a release date right here somewhere. February 14th, 1992. I saw it just before because it was a press screening, and it was fascinating. The audience didn't know what to do with it half the time. Yeah. Because they wanted it to be more one-linery And
Sure.
when Chris Farley showed up, people were happy. And when the cameo and the Robert Patrick Terminator 2 thing was a
Yeah.
huge moment, because that was like 8 months after that film had opened. But the quieter interludes, which are the things that I think I remember most vividly, are the ones that just sort of sat there because people didn't know where the jokes were.
Yeah.
And then to watch it become a monster, Wikipedia says it grossed 183.1 million on a budget of 20 million. 20 million still seems impossibly high, but
A lot of locations.
yeah, that's true. But to watch it become what it became was really surprising, because I would have figured it wasn't going to have legs from that screening. But oh, they love it. They love the world. The world embraced Wayne and his weird
Yeah.
little heart.
Well, from the SNL sketch and from the earlier Wayne stuff, yeah, maybe the audience would be expecting, yeah, as you say, like more one-liners, a more straightforward, not this like meta comedy that, and obviously comedians have addressed camera before and broken the fourth wall, but
Mm.
maybe in more specific, or maybe, I don't know. I guess Annie Hall was kind of a hit. But like, I don't know. I don't know if that had been done in such a like mainstream targeted film before, right? Like it seems common now. Like Deadpool is
Oh yeah.
like a direct descendant Lego movie. Same thing. There's tons of films that are doing the um mega mainstream film that is, borrowing this sort of language or this sort of performance. But I guess Ferris Bueller as well. That predates Wayne's World, right?
Yeah, it's
87?
86.
Same 86. Yeah.
6 years before that.
Yeah.
But wait,
Yeah.
but yeah, but Ferris Bueller, it's funny. The second you mentioned, it's like, oh, of course. But Wayne's World, it's a totally different film. Ferris Bueller as a character is incredibly selfish and manipulative. And like, he's still the good guy because he's the narrator.
Yeah.
But if people have done the whole Fight Club thing or Calvin and Hobbes thing where like he's a
Yes.
projection of Cameron's broken psyche. And I mean, maybe, but when you look at it, you just watch him peer pressuring people constantly, especially Cameron, who is the victim.
Directly
Yeah, who is the
berating him.
absolute
Yeah.
victim of his
Yeah.
scheming. Um, and the attempt at the end is like, oh no, I did all this for you because you need a break. It's like, that feels sociopathic. You're just coming up with that now. But Wayne is a genuine host. Like he
Yes.
is helping us all into the world and keeping us there. And he does do his best to make everything more fun for everyone around him. I mean, like the Bohemian Rhapsody thing originally was supposed to be them trying to keep their drunk friend from throwing up in the car. That's what the
Yes, they
no is.
rescue him. They
Yeah.
rescue him off the park bench.
Yeah. You sort of see
Garth
it
pulls
here and there.
the Dixie cup out of his pocket. If you're gonna spew in this.
Yeah.
The one-liner that's very cute.
But then they realized both in the shoot and the edit that it was just more of a celebration of the song and everybody just enjoying themselves.
Yeah.
So they abandoned the vomiting bit, which I think is probably best, because I think it would have landed very, very differently if it had ended up with somebody throwing up in the car, like actively grossing people out. The gross out stuff would come later in the Austin Powers, right? But Wayne is too sweet.
That makes me think of the I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but the Fish Called Wanda story about the
dog,
dog being crushed, right? They did it both ways, and there's one with the blood and everyone was horrified, and the one without and everyone laughed.
Yeah.
Actually, the headbang scene too with the drunk friend at the beginning, Bohemian Rhapsody. There's something so amazing about all those elements coming together and really setting the tone for the film. This goes back to my high-low thing. I mean, what band other than Queen more perfectly encapsulated the combination of like low culture rock and roll mixed with high culture opera, like in that record, that song, it's the oh Jesus, I can't believe I'm gonna say this. It's the apotheosis of the entwining of these two forms, and yeah, just paired perfectly with Wayne and Gar. It's what the film is. The film is Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah, and you're not wrong. It is the high wire moment too. And if it didn't work, I don't think the film lives. But you have that early enough in the movie. I mean, it became its own music video, which was just ridiculous because it is just footage from the film, lip syncing and all of that. But it instantly tells you what kind of movie this is, what kind of world you're in. And that thing about do we even have a culture now where people drive around aimlessly singing songs to each other? Do we even do that anymore? Is there a
I
song
don't
that
know.
everyone would know in the same way? And here I am turning into the kids today, but like now it's, I think, like theater kids and show tunes, absolutely. But
Yeah.
I don't know if you have the same kind of, you know, 18-year-olds driving around shouting "You Shook Me All Night Long" to each other that
Yeah.
we
I
used to
mean,
do. Well, I suppose it's also
well,
now an old song.
for me and my brother, it was the Pointer Sisters, and we would drive along. We would borrow my mom's car and drive to the grocery store, windows down. I'm so excited. Yeah, Neutron Dance was a
Neutron
big
Dance,
one.
I was going to say that was a
Neutron
huge hit
Dance.
there around that time.
But yeah, I mean, we could spin off into a whole other thing about the kids today. But kids are driving less, kids are partying less. There's also things to do and to occupy their minds. Like I feel like driving around with your friends and belting out songs is as much a function of teenage boredom than anything else. Whereas, we didn't have I could play NHL 94 with one of my friends if they came over to the
Right.
house.
Yeah.
Versus today where you could play against anyone in the world online, whatever video game you like at all times, whatever thing you want to stream, whatever's on your phone. There's more to do. So yeah, the kids are fine, but yeah, I don't think they're doing this.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like it has become a time capsule now of a
Yeah.
type of, and of course, like Myers is, I think he's like we're basically a year apart. So he would have been doing it in the early 80s as
Mm.
a kid. And he's already defining this because it is a memory for him. Because he's already gone, like he's been in Second City and he's been in Saturday Night Live. He's had a life by the time he makes Wayne's World, but he can still reconnect with that version of himself who, he always said that the greatest contradiction of Wayne is that he wasn't a metalhead. He was a punk. Like he was a Scarborough
Mm.
punk. Famously, he would go downtown and go to clubs and pogo around and be a proper, like what he called a proper punk rocker, which I wish there were photographs of it because I don't buy it. I cannot believe it.
Right. What was the Toronto punk scene? Yeah.
We had one,
Sure.
but
But what
yeah,
was
it was
it? I want
still
to see it.
exactly. It was a lot
Yeah.
more gentle, I think. The idea that he had to pivot to being a metalhead and that he would pick Queen, which is not metal at all, right? Like all of Wayne's references are old enough to be Mike Myers's references for what
Right.
metal was, and it's more
Yeah.
glam rock.
Yeah. Yep. That's fair.
But
Yep.
but that's why I think the movie becomes universal because they're not none of it is quite right. Nothing quite fits. And
Right.
so you're watching this collection of things that are genuine enthusiasms. Like Wayne must love these because we're seeing them. And it doesn't matter that they're 1970s tracks and that Alice Cooper, even in 1992, was not what Alice Cooper was in 1975. But he makes it all work because it's a patchwork, a quilt of reference points that don't make sense to each other except through Wayne and Garth.
Yeah.
So we always come back to them.
Yeah.
It's genius, but I don't know if it was intentional. Someday I'll ask him about it.
Well, it's also, there's not a lot. Maybe what's also interesting is it is this patchwork. And when you're young, when you're becoming whoever you're going to become, as you're trying on different personas and trying things on, you have different interests and you're not as calculated about the way you present yourself to the world.
Mm.
And, is any self-respecting metalhead or punk out there showing their love for sports by playing hockey in the street or having a genial conversation with a cop at the local Tim Hortons,
Right.
who's your
Yeah.
buddy. There's it's they're kids figuring it out, and there's something really innocent and pure about that. And it's the film is plot wise is ostensibly about uh the battle between art and commerce, right? The
Mm-hmm.
eternal battle. And yeah, what's more teen angsty than rejecting that corporate world? It's a kids movie. It's a coming of age film.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
remarkably PG rated. Like it is given the nature of SNL movies. Obviously, there are films that are just gross and weird, and all the Will Ferrell ones are sexually creepy and bizarre in the way that he can channel into comedy so beautifully. Like Night at the Roxbury has basically just nothing but dry humping. That's the
Right.
movie,
Yes.
or Superstar with with Molly Shannon just going all in on the weirdness of Mary Catherine Gallagher and making people very, very uncomfortable for comic. Like that's Borat before Borat. And here we just have this absolute refusal. Like he's not going to do anything other with Cassandra than cuddle. Like that's
Yes, they have the flashing super on the screen gratuitous sex scene, but
yeah.
even then they're both fully, I mean, he's wearing a t-shirt and his tidy whities and she's fully clothed, and yeah, that he's just kind of making animal noises, you know.
Yeah.
It's
I
very,
mean,
yeah.
maybe
No, go
that's why
ahead.
oh no, maybe that's why it was a hit. Like it is ultimately like an all ages comedy
Yeah.
disguised as something a little more grown up. And this is like the other thing that keeps coming back to me is that it's 3 years after Bill and Ted. And so it was dismissed initially as a Bill and Ted knockoff, even though like it's completely different. Yes, you have two friends who are closer than brothers and weirdos and speak in a very kind of casual, affected internal language that no one else can understand. But ultimately, that's Hope and Crosby, right? Like it's buddy comedies that date back
Yeah.
to the 30s and 40s. It's not a direct ripoff, and it's not like there's no science fiction element whatsoever, which is Bill and Ted is smart because it's not only is it really fun, but its narrative is an ingenious bit of screenwriting, and this is much shaggier and looser. Yeah, you mentioned Linklater movies. It's not too far off. It's more self-aware, and it's also trying more like aggressively to be a comedy. But you could put this one next to Jesse and Celine and see what happens.
I mean, Slacker is a whole film of the camera being handed off, and they do that gag, God,
Yeah,
30 times in Wayne's World, you know? It's and yeah, the Bill and Ted thing is also interesting because, and man, I love Bill and Ted. But Bill and Ted's the language, the way they speak, it does feel very much like a 35-year-old screenwriter writing the like surfer patois. Like it's that feels like they're like, oh, I recognize these type, and there's whenever, and again, love it, but whenever I've rewatched it. It always feels a little bit like we're mocking these types, where like a little, and in Wayne's World. I don't know if anyone does speak quite like Wayne and Garth. It feels like they're inhabiting their own space that feels authentic to them as characters, And
yeah.
maybe that's a function of Mike Myers. Did he write this or co-write it, or what's the?
I
I
think
should
he
I should know
co-wrote it,
this.
if not wrote it directly. I've got it right here. Yeah, he wrote it with Bonnie and Terry Turner, who were SNL writers.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, maybe that's just a function of him understanding the voice of the character and wanting it, but it just sounds specific and truer to like the world, even though it's not the real world at all, not even close. It's this weird meta fantasy version of Toronto that's set in the Chicago suburbs, the Chicagoland area. But it's yeah, it feels like a place that exists to me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think as much as like Bill and Ted are a surfer riff, Wayne and Garth, it's more like they are their own regional dialect, which is specific to their block,
Yes,
right?
yes,
It's like a neighbor.
yes.
It's like how in England you go 15 minutes and the accents are completely different because they were always so isolated. Here, it's
Right.
just like this one block had something in the water that people couldn't quite process
Yeah.
consonants the same way.
Yeah. There
But
was
it's
one
the
video store that had 14 VHS tapes, and it was the only ones that any of them rented. That's where they
yeah,
got all the references. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it's so strangely um, sequestered that
Yeah.
they only have each other, they only have themselves, they only have their local culture. But somehow, like again, right, like the more specific you become, the more universal the appeal is because people
Yeah.
just imprint themselves onto it.
Also, speaking of, we haven't talked really about Tia Carrere's character at all. You know, like speaking of like the universal, it's really interesting that like in this film, this 1992, this like very like white film
Mhm.
set in like the suburbs of Toronto. It's like Cassandra Wong is this character who's just uh, not reduced to like a stereotype or any of these things. Like she's amazing. She's this like multi-dimensional female lead in the film who's like an incredible singer, doing her own singing in the film and on
Mhm.
the soundtrack, which was a big hit. It's the reason I subscribed to Columbia Music House initially. Got that as one of my first 11 CDs. But yeah, she's speaking Cantonese in the film. She's fighting. She's a romantic partner, but she's not like just a love interest. And like they have this relationship that's like an interracial relationship, but it's like just presented very matter-of-factly, like normalized. It's not like the point of their, like it's just like, hey, look at this. Look at this in this mainstream film. And it's just uh it's it fits perfectly in the world, even
Yeah,
though I feel like very unusual at the time.
it was. I think I'd seen her in something else, a role that did not give her nearly enough space to
Yeah.
like act, to actually perform a character. And you're right. Like the her, I'm just thinking about her introduction where she is like sort of deliberately sexualized in a rock way, but not like the film isn't leering at her. And that
Right.
I'm sure that's Spheeris, right? Because she knew how to shoot musicians without making them,
Yep.
um, without ogling them. But there's a well, I mean, Wayne respects everybody, right? So of course he respects her as well. But she is given a lot more space within it. Like it again, it's because Mike Myers isn't playing all the characters yet.
Right.
The actors
Yeah.
have to do stuff, and he and the script and the film are generous enough with all the roles that Cassandra, who could have easily been a throwaway love interest and damsel in distress towards the end, like she just gets to be indignant about the way she's being treated here and there, never by
Yeah.
Wayne but by other people. And that's a color you don't often see in supporting girlfriend characters, especially in comedies from 1992. And what was the line? She learned English at college and watching the Police Academy movies,
The
which
Police
just
Academy was incredible.
gives her so
It's
much
great.
range in there.
Yes. And your point about Spears's eye, like Cassandra is like almost always presented in an elevated position. And
Mm-hmm.
when Wayne first sees her, he's just a member of the crowd. Like he's a fan. Like as much as he's a fan of all pop culture, he doesn't separate himself from the masses. He's one of the people. And in that moment, he's admiring Cassandra the same way anyone else is who'd be admiring a super talented musician. And you're right, like she is sexualized in the way that like many women in rock at the time were sexual, but like she's also presented as like a master of her craft, like
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
like a killer bassist, a killer singer. It's those elements as much as anything else that I think Wayne is attracted to. And when they're in the record store or the music store, as Garth is like putting on a master class of drumming and then just I like to play so great. But like when Wayne is admiring the Strat, Cassandra knows as much about it as him, more. She's like, if I had that thing, I'd lower the bridge, I'd change the, like she's talking about how she'd set up the guitar, like
Right, right,
so
right.
cool. And like yeah, Spears giving like all the, I mean, I guess this is in the script as well, but like the supporting characters across the board, even just people who have like a scene, are so good. Like there's so many like memorable small parts in the film that, again, I feel like is more common now, but I don't really remember that being the case. Like the attention to detail with casting and giving people, you know, chances to do something memorable in a film, like
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh no, you're right. It does not happen these days. When it does, it's shocking. When you
Yeah.
see somebody break through in a tiny role, and it's just like, oh, I'm following that person to the next thing. That
Yeah.
just it happens infrequently at best. I think Canadian films are better at it than American films because we have that talent pool where everybody's been working long enough for the most part that someone will pop in one scene.
Right.
So you bring him in like a Rodrigo Fernandez Stoll for just like, I know exactly what he can do and how he'll do it. So you say this line and people will enjoy it. Well, I mean, it's kind of the way you cast Young Werther, if I can turn it back to you,
Oh,
and make sure that everybody in it is going to deliver on the scene that they're in and the moment that they're in. I mean, I'm just thinking of somebody like Amrit Kaur, who I knew from
amazing.
Queen of My Dreams and who I was so happy to see show up in this as just someone who makes faces half the time, but the faces are always in reaction to what's going on. Like she pulls focus because she's such a great actor, such a fun presence. But I was so glad that you get the chance to show her just being a lively scene partner in a way that she doesn't often get to do on her HBO show, just because she's constantly like setting things up. Like the scripts are different, they're structured to constantly make her work. And here, just those scenes in bars where she's just kind of scowling or frowning or smiling, it's just like, oh, this is why you cast someone in a role that's the second banana to the female lead, because she can be a whole banana. Like she can do everything in these scenes. Not
She
that the leads
is.
aren't great either.
Oh no, no. I love the leads, but I don't get to talk enough about Amrit. She's so, like so smart and such an artist and so creative and like I don't know if I've ever met anyone who can improvise in character the way that she can, and not improvise in like necessarily like a comedic way, like here's rat-tat-tat, like joke after joke, let me iterate. But I mean, she can iterate, but she'll iterate from a place of character that is funny and appropriate to the scene and can, as you say, like react beautifully. Like she's just an incredibly talented actor, like she's maybe, well, I mean, of course, this is not news to anyone who's seen Queen of My Dreams or her HBO show, like she's but yeah, she's a very, very special person and performer and yeah, just an energy that's yeah, she's just very unique, very uniquely talented. So happy she's in the movie. It's crazy. It's crazy. What a cast.
Yeah, but your entire cast is given that same respect by the film waits for moments like that to happen, which I just loved about it. The sense that, I mean, we've talked about this before a number of times, the sense that you've made a movie about people who will do literally anything to avoid confronting the truth about what they want or what they need or what they think they need. I was trying to find out, when you picked Wayne's World, I did the thing I always do, which is try to stitch back and see how the two films intertwine. And I suppose Werther's narration is part of it, like the sense that you have this text that you're drawing on to create your world. But the thing that I came away with is this sense of the idealized city where they're in a playground because they can afford to be, but also that there is the sense that the quests they set for themselves are sort of foolish, and winning them won't solve anything. Like actually, Wayne has a genuine challenge to his integrity. Does he sell the show? Does he let Cassandra get bought and turned into a corporate rock star? Does he fight for the things he believes in? But because the movie is so gentle in its pacing and plotting, there's less urgency to it. But yeah, Werther is, if he steps back a second and realizes what he's doing is actively trying to break up a relationship so he can be happy with his infatuation, he'd realize he's a terrible person, or not a terrible person, but a vapid rich idiot, which is not how he sees himself. So, Wayne knows who he is from the start. And with Werther, I think it's his journey towards realizing that he's not who he thinks he is, but could be someone better if he tried.
I mean, I think you said it perfectly. Yes. I have nothing to add.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
But to that end, did you lean on Wayne's World deliberately when making Young Werther? Was it in your mind?
Not like as you're saying this, as you're saying, trying to find a way to stitch together between the films. As you're saying that, I was like, oh God, I should have thought of something. Maybe we should have been discussing a film that I maybe more directly was thinking about while making Werther or while writing the script. But I mean, I'll say this about it: I wasn't actively thinking about Wayne's World. I don't think at any point with Werther, but it is one of those films that I had that VHS tape, and I've seen your Blu-ray and DVD collection. And you know what it's like to be young, and you only have a few tapes, and you only buy the tapes that you truly of the movies that you truly love, and it's a film that I've seen. This is going to sound like an exaggeration, but I've probably seen it really, I got to say 70 times. I've seen that movie 70 times. And, like the same way that I rewatched every episode of like Faulty Towers and like Meaning of Life and Princess Bride. And like, there were just certain films and TV shows and things when I was young that, that stuff gets inside you on some level and it doesn't ever really go away. I can't necessarily point directly to any specific thing from any of those things but yeah, it's all there. It's all like, I'm going to be unconsciously stealing from those things for the rest of my life because it's there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if the things we watch are the things that create us, right? Like we are an accumulation of influences and experiences.
High fidelity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
absolutely.
Is that the theory? Yeah.
We just had Steve Pink on the show last week.
Oh, yeah.
It's inevitable, but it also, I love those moments of connection where you just suddenly turn around and it's like, oh, the opening of Dune Part 2 is the opening of Lawrence of Arabia's second act because Denis Villeneuve wants to make sure you don't miss the comparisons and all the things in there. And we talked about Dune Part 1 and he was totally open about it, that was his starting point that he wanted to make an anti-colonial film, a version of Dune, and Lawrence was the obvious white savior photocopy that he needed to make. But the subtle things, the ways that, I mean, it's not that you have recreated Wayne and Garth as aristocratic, noble Canadians in modern day Toronto, but you kind of do have that sense that these characters are skipping through the world, one kind of pulling his friend forward. That's what came back to me. It's just like he's constantly pushing him to do things.
Yeah, Werther and Paul do actually have a bit of a Wayne and a Garth kind of thing now that but again, maybe this goes back to your point earlier that this is like an archetype, sort of the more adventurous friend and the more reserved friend that goes back, however many years. Back to the Bible. I'm sure there's a Bible story, right?
But those don't end well. They never end well. Young Werther at least gives us a happy ending.
Does it?
Yes. Yes, it does.
I like that.
My thanks to José Avelino Gilles Corbett Lourenço, whose delightful first feature Young Werther opens across Canada this Friday, January 10th. You don't want to miss it. Thanks also to Angie Power. She knows what she did. You can find José on Instagram at jose.lorenzo.writer, and you can find Wayne's World on 4K, Blu-ray, and DVD from Paramount Home Entertainment. It's also streaming on Hollywood Suite in Canada and on Fubo in the US, and available to rent or buy on various VOD services across North America. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 42 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster as soon as you can. I'll see you next week.